as Nate mentioned, we're going to be talking about Room Family Manager, specifically for an education project. So as we've done in the last one, we talked about the mixed medical project. We're going to quickly recap what the features of Room Family Manager are in case you didn't see some of the previous series. So just kind of bullet pointing the 5 different major steps. We have the creation or selection of room family parameters, which we'll take a look at today. Definition of room types, we'll take a look at that today as well. Assigning of room types to Revit rooms, definitely we'll be doing that. Creation of families and room validation, we'll touch on that a little bit again, though we won't be focusing on that one too heavily. And we'll also talk a little bit about swapping of final family selections in the model. So first of all, the workflow goes like this. With the Room Family Manager, you have to make sure you have the correct parameters for tracking the room type and the validation status of the rooms. This is used by Room Family Manager. As room types are assigned, it assigns the room type. And then later on, as you're working through after assigning room types and working with them, you can validate them over time, and you can easily recall that information back up into the Room Family Manager tool. We'll take a look at that in a moment here. The Room Types tab, the second step, allows designers to build room types. Now today what I'm going to be doing is working on a slightly more refined spreadsheet that I've been using and kind of building up a little bit, which you all are free to obtain if you'd like it. It has 3 separate tabs in it. The primary tab that we'll be using here is the ability to list every type of room, and so I'm doing that. But then I'm also working on the ability to associate content so that designers can easily specify dynamically components for creation. Today's example is education-based. Or if they want to, they can specify the final family if it's known. And today we're going to talk about how to make that final family a little easier for them to select directly. So that's kind of today's workflow that we're going to focus on and then show how it works for the full workflow. Ultimately, you can assign room types to actual drawn rooms in the Revit model. It allows you an easy table to see the actual Revit rooms and to make new assignments. You can always revisit this and reassign room types as time goes on, if need be. And you can also continue to refine it as the project matures and continue to assign room types as rooms are placed. It also allows for some nice little sorting in there so you can easily sort your rooms. And we'll kind of take a look at that today after we refine a couple of rooms in the floor plan view. So the next tab here is the ability to swap families. So if the designer uses placeholder content, just some basic design content that's dynamically created, over time, the actual drafters and the architects on the project are going to probably want to swap out that generic content for actual content that represents the real components much more appropriately. Actual chairs, actual desks instead of just cubes that are placed out in the model. So what you can do is room by room, tell it which actual families you want to use. In this case, we'll be taking a look at a middle school / high school project, and possibly the student desks used for younger students might be different than student desks used for some of the older students. And so that's why this has the ability on a room type by room type basis to swap it out. The designer might just say, I need 30 student desks in this space. But as time goes on, you want to refine that. The actual space those desks take up might be a little bit different depending on the age group. So this gives you a really easy project-wide replacement for those specific families. It makes that management really easy. So with that, let's jump directly into Revit now and take a look at this, see how this workflow actually works. In fact, before we get to Revit, we're actually going to take a look at a different portion here. We're going to take a look at Windows Explorer. And that's because what I have is, I'm going to try and pull this on screen here in just a moment. What I have in Windows Explorer is sort of a directory from my Room Family Manager sample workflows folder here. And one of the files I've generated is this Room Family Manager template XLSX file. I'm using the XLSX because I'm doing some extra lookups that I don't think the XLS file necessarily supports. So that's fine because Room Family Manager can use this just fine. Now, I'm not going to open this up in Room Family Manager. I could actually go to Revit Express Tools here and open up the Room Family Manager tool itself. And for Room Family Manager, after doing my assigning of parameter types, which I'll get to in a moment here, I could go to my Build Room Types tab, and I could open a spreadsheet that I've been working with here. So I can go to, you know, my templates directory here where I've got some of my sample content, where all my Revit Express Tools workflows are saved here, Room Family Manager folder. And I can choose the RFM template XLSX file and open this up. The problem is that our environment here doesn't necessarily support the full functionality of Excel. We do give you the ability to edit content here, so that if you were in Revit, you can define room types. But in a lot of cases, the designers won't necessarily be directly right here. This is more a tool for the technician or the Revit user who's going to be importing that content into the project just to make sure everything's looking good. So before I get to this tab here, or to this step, what I'm going to do is start where I believe most designers will be kind of kicking off their workflow, which will be directly in Excel. So what I might do is open up this Room Family Manager template in Excel directly, and I might do something like a save as. Now, you might want to take that and make that an XLSXT or whatever, so it's actually an XLTX, actually I suppose it would be the Excel template file. What I'm going to do is save it as a new file for today's purposes. So today is 2015-07-28, as I recall, and this is my education project or something. It could be if I could spell, that'd be great too. Education. Maybe I need some education. Education project here. So with this, you know, this might be a project number and a project name, might be saved in my project directory. The designer might take this on site working with the clients to figure out exactly what the content is they need. So what I've done with this template specifically is I've listed out some typical room types. So for an education type project, they may have certain room types that they use on a regular basis. This is a relatively short list for some of the room types that I might use. But, you know, certainly this is going to make the selection of the room types on the Room Families tab a lot easier for the designer. What I've done on the Rooms Families tab is done a simple little lookup right here. So that instead of them typing out the name every single time, they can simply drop the list down, and they can see a list of valid selections that they can leverage. They can always add to this list over here if they want new room types. They can start here and maybe add in, I don't know, office, let's go, teaching assistant. Okay, so I can put that in there as one of my options. And then if I go back to Rooms and Families tab here, if I scroll to the bottom, I should have office, teacher, assistant. I guess my list isn't quite long enough here. I may have to modify my actual lookup list. Mine, I may have made it an explicit length. Oh, there it is, office teaching assistant. So it is in the list here, actually. So it is using that list directly. And of course, if I wanted to make this a little bit better, what I might actually do is, you know, take this column right here and right-click on this and then sort this alphabetically, so it's actually an alphabetical list, making it a little easier to find when I'm back on this tab over here. So as I scroll down, instead of it being at the very bottom, Office Teaching Assistants is actually alphabetically in the correct spot on that list. So that's just something nice I can do for myself. Now, in addition to the room types, so if I'm over here actually assigning room types, here's what the normal traditional workflow is. A person should normally type out a room over here. So if I go in here and say, this is a classroom, if I drop this list down, yeah, I know, there's a invalid entry here. Classroom, let's do grade 12. Then I would go to my family and type list here, and I'd type something out right here. I'd enter, you know, a piece of equipment, like a desk teacher. Okay, so I'd enter a particular piece of equipment right here. And then, or if I have a lookup like I do over here for the actual room type, and I'll show you how I built this in a minute, what I can actually do is drop this list down and choose from the list, say desk-instructor, and instead of me now going over here and entering a quantity of 1 and then knowing what the actual dimensions are for my typical desks for a teacher's desk, I could have a lookup that could actually figure out what the length, width, and height should actually be. And I can have a standardized naming convention that I can use consistently for future parts of my workflow. So if I make a list for them and drop this list down, if I enter, in this case, for example, desk instructor, what this can do is automatically look up from this other typical equipment tab down here some of my lengths, my widths, and my height. Now, the quantity is still going to be set by me, but the physical dimensions, they can very easily go through and just choose the individual pieces of equipment that they want. They can go back and go, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do grade 12 again. And let's also put in here some kind of waste receptacle. I'm going to drop this down. Here's a waste basket. So if I choose that, I can see the typical sizes pop in over here. And maybe I want to have two waste baskets, one at the teacher's desk and one at the door or something. So I can have a couple of these pre-built-in niceties that are available directly in Excel. So what I have here on my typical equipment tab, similar to my room types. My room types is a list of room types, okay? If I go over here to my typical equipment, what I have is a list of typical pieces of equipment that I might use in this project, and I have length, width, and height specified for those where I don't specify an explicit family. Now, one of the features that you can do here in the rooms and families is you can specify a very specific piece of equipment. So let's do one more grade 12 room here. If I go down here and grab, not grade 11, let's grab grade 12. And possibly here what I want to do is use the chair tablet arm, which is an actual family in my list. And I also want to make sure I'm using the correct type. So when I specify this like this, where I have a family name, colon, space, and a type name, a very specific type name, as long as that family is loaded in my project, it'll automatically place the real piece of content that I want to use. So I'm not placing necessarily placeholders like I am here. I'm actually placing the exact piece of equipment. Now, when I'm doing that, I'm not specifying a length, a width, and a height. I'm leaving that blank because the family itself already knows what its physical sizes are, so I don't need to specify anything here. I specify sizes when I'm choosing just a generic name out here and wanting to put just something in my project as a placeholder. So I've gone over here to my rooms and families. I'm using an explicit type right now, a family and type, and because of that, all I have to do is specify a quantity. Maybe I'm going to have 28 desks in a particular space. So I don't need to know the length, width, and height. That'll get taken care of automatically. So again, the designer who's on site with the client probably isn't going to know family names and type names. This is true if I'm doing a medical project or an education project, or even like a secured facility detention center type project. I'm not going to necessarily know if I'm a designer on site what the family and type names are. But if you provide them to me in a template based on a certain project type, and I can know what they are, you've perhaps pre-entered them. Maybe you've extracted them from the project as a list. It just makes it a little easier for the designer to choose the right content, and it might save you some steps in the future if they're able to spec the actual piece of equipment right away. May also assist in some of the spatial planning because the real piece of content is in use immediately when the room type is generated and the content is placed. So they can specify a quantity, and they can completely ignore these other three columns over here. So I can go through this list, and I can continue to generate a bunch more, values for this particular room type. I'm just going to go ahead and save this right now. So each piece of content, each family that needs to be included in a room has to be listed with its room type. So I'm going to have, 13, 14 entries here on the grade 12 room. I might take and copy all those rows for my grade 11 so I can have a typical room type for that. And then I might change some of the actual equipment that's available in those types of rooms. Or maybe I just have a generic classroom, and then for some of my specialty classrooms, I can go through the process of saying, oh, this is a specialty room and it uses this types of equipment. Maybe it's middle school versus high school, or whatever the case may be. You can specify these how you'd like, as long as you've got yourself specific room types that you want to use, and you've got those room types listed out with all the equipment that you want inside of them. So let me pull up an example that I built a little earlier. If I save this, what I can do is I can go ahead and open another one that I built earlier. It's my educational example room template. So this one here, I've got just a few more rooms. I haven't defined every room yet. I've just kind of pulled out a couple. I've got like an auditorium style of rooms right here with some equipment inside of them. Again, these are all running their selections based on lookup. So if I wanted to have a computer monitor specifically, I can choose that. And you'll notice over here my length, my width, and my height are automatically updating accordingly. In this case, I probably really want to have a computer because I've already got a monitor on the next row down. I've got one computer, one monitor. Got about 250 auditorium seats inside of there for my different chairs. Those are all being looked up as well for their specific length, width, and height. I've got my grade 12 rooms inside of here. Again, all this is being looked up, and then I've got a distance learning room that I've kind of pre-planned a little bit. So these are all ready to go. I can use these now in Room Family Manager. This right here is what Room Family Manager is going to use as a definition for my room type. And all the equipment that's listed associated to that room type will be placed inside of that room. The quantity is respected, and if it needs to generate physical sizes, those will be respected as well. Now, I'm going through and specifically using the lookup here because in previous workflows, I've noticed that if I entered a computer, for example, and I didn't have the same width, length, and height, then as it placed the next computer, it would just automatically reassign the width, length, and height, and I might get some oddball results if I don't carefully manage my actual physical sizes. That's why I decided that a lookup might be really nice, where these three columns here are doing a lookup based on the value of this cell right here and pulling its length, width, and height off of this extra tab. Again, if you want my template, feel free to put that in the feedback at the end of this presentation, and Nate and I will be certain to get you that information later on as we send out the updates for the videos for this presentation today or tomorrow. So I'm going to shut this one down, not save it. I'm going to close this one here. I've already saved that one. Let's jump into Revit to see how this actually works. So I have a floor plan out here, a presentation floor plan with some classrooms generated. Now, maybe I've got this room right here, and this happens to be my distance learning room. So I'm going to go ahead and modify this one. This is one of my educational room types here. I'm just going to call this distance learning. So this might just be a room with some video equipment and a desk in it that an instructor can use to talk with students that perhaps aren't directly, you know, in the school at the moment. So maybe I got over here, I've got like a K-12 room. This is or not a K-12, a grade 12. So classroom, and this will be 12. This will be classroom 12. This maybe is more of like a private style school where they have perhaps fewer classrooms than say a public school may have. Maybe I've got like a classroom grade 11 or something, right? So depending on what I've got going on here, I'm going to take this classroom 12, this classroom 12, and my distance learning room up here, and I'm going to assign the appropriate equipment to them automatically based on what I've got inside my spreadsheet. So I'm going to synchronize to Central real quick here just to make sure my project has been saved and I've given up control of everything. I like to do that before I start using Room Family Manager. I'm going to go to the Room Family Manager tool. And the first step that you should always do in your projects using the RFM Parameters tab here is to make sure you've got a parameter, a text-based parameter in your project that is useful for the room type that Room Family Manager can use. Now, we generate one for you automatically. We have this Add Parameter button right here, and if you use that, it'll generate a project parameter called RFM Room Type if you don't have one of your own. Or if you do have one, of course, again, you can certainly leverage that by dropping this list down and choosing a text-based parameter. You also need to have a parameter here for the validation status. Most people probably don't have this one. So again, you can use the Add Parameter button over here, and we'll automatically generate for you a project parameter called RFM validation status. Unless you want to use your own, you can certainly leverage the one that we generate for you. Now, after you've selected these two, you must hit Save Project or it won't let you continue on. So it's going to go ahead and push a save into the project and actually permanently define these parameters right here. Then what you do is you go to your next step, and this is where you build your room types. Well, the room types have already technically been built, but what you do have to do is load the spreadsheet that contains them. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my educational sample project or sample spreadsheet here that has some of those values that I was looking at. Now, in some cases here, I don't have some proper sizes for my different components like the TV and the DVD. I didn't actually fill those out because those aren't a part of my typical equipment tab over here. I didn't actually fill those out inside of here, and the designer perhaps didn't know. So we're going to find out what happens if the length, width, and height is actually excluded when I try to place those distance learning pieces of equipment out there. We're going to see if it actually will give me a TV in that space or a DVD player. It'll probably be a generic size if it does at all, maybe like 1 foot by 1 foot. But, you know, certainly it's better if you actually can spatially plan it out instead of just having a garbage piece of content. As far as the grade 12 room goes, all of those have sizes with the exception of this one right here, which is the chair tablet arm, which is like a basic student desk. There's 30 of those getting placed. There's no physical size because those sizes are coming from the actual family and type here. So what I'm going to do is go to the next step. Since I've loaded this spreadsheet in now, I'm going to go ahead and assign the room types to the actual rooms I've got in my project. And I'm going to start by sorting this by the room name. Now, My room names have already been defined based on my rooms that are out here in my project. I've got a classroom 11, a 12, two 12s, and a distance learning room. Those are all a part of my academic department out here. So I'm going to take my classroom 12, I'm going to take them both and assign the room types here of, let's see, classroom grade 12. I'm going to go ahead and choose that for this list. I've also got my distance learning, so I'm going to assign room types here to distance learning. Where's my distance learning room type? Classroom, there it is, classroom distance learning. So I'm going to choose that one. I don't have an assignment here for the classroom 11 because if I go back again to my build room types tab, there's no classroom grade 11 in this list. So because of that, there is no ability for me to currently assign classroom 11 just yet. So I'm going to wait on that one. But once I've assigned those room types, what I'm going to do is go to my next step here, which is place families and validate. So for the 3 room types where I actually do have a room type associated to it, what I'm going to do is use the place families option. Now I can drop this list down and I can tell it to consider both the room type definition and the family mapping, the default configuration, or just consider the room type definitions for when it places the equipment. Now what does that mean? Well, if I'm over here on the build room type tab, this is the original spec of my families that it's supposed to be placing. So if I use the place families option here that says only consider the type definition, then it will only place content that exists right here. Now we haven't gotten to the next step yet, which is actually allowing me to swap families over here where I can actually choose different options for the family types that are going to be placed out there. If I had, and I had, say, for example, a desk instructor. I don't think I have a desk in my project right now. Let's find out. See if I scroll down here, looking for something that looks like a desk. Yeah, I don't think I actually have a desk loaded right now. Had I had a desk loaded, I could have chosen that from this list. Oh, look at this. I've got a chair stacking. So you know what? I'm going to use this for one of these distance learning chairs down here. I've got chair instructor. I'm just going to give them a really garbage stacking chair right here. If I go to chair, stacking chair, then when I'm placing the actual families right here, if I choose considering the type definitions only, it'll only think about what I originally defined. If I choose consider both type definitions and family mappings, which is my swap families tab up here, then what it will do is actually consider the swapped out family right here for the stacking chair and place that in place of the one that was spec'd by the designer, saying that it was going to be the chair instructor. So that's the 2 different options that we've got here for the place families. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose, well, I'm going to first of all get rid of this swapped family. We'll come back and do that later on. So right now, it doesn't really matter which option I use. I'm going to go ahead and use one of them. It rips through my project and places those families out there. It's going to yell at me about a few things because some of these objects are placed directly on top of each other. So it gives me a number of warnings because it feels like I'm going to get double counting in that there's a lot of components placed on top of each other. That's okay. Not a problem. What I do want to make my next task is to go through and actually lay out a space. So if I took some of these pieces of equipment out here, like I've got this desk instructor, I can put this, oops, I double-clicked on that. That was not intentional. That opened up the family. What I want to do is actually take this instructor desk right here and put this someplace in the room. Maybe it's at an angle in the room or something. I don't know. There's maybe video equipment over here looking at it. So I've got this chair instructor. This is probably going to sit near the desk or under the desk. So I'm going to drag that over by the desk. You know, I've got some other pieces of equipment here, like the wastebasket is here. Probably put this next to the desk. I could rotate that and move it around. I've got that distance learning printer, which is a physical size printer out there. There's actually a lot of this equipment out here that's going to be really tiny now. I've got my AV ports. It's super small. Actually, there's only that little bit of equipment. I'm missing a few things. The reason why I'm missing a few things is because the designer, when going through that spreadsheet, remember I had those missing fields out there? That's spreadsheet link, not the right tool. Room Family Manager. When I was going through as the designer and filling out some of the equipment that I needed, I didn't give it a physical size over here. Revit assumes that means I'm placing an explicit family and type. Well, it couldn't find this family and type. It couldn't find a physical size to give to it, so it didn't do anything. So I'm missing a lot of the equipment that I would need in that space because I didn't actually supply the proper physical dimensions that I would need to. This is a reason why I feel it's pretty important over here to have a typical equipment area where the designer designer can go through and just choose, maybe define the individual pieces of content with physical sizes once, and then choose them from the list over here. So if I had a TV, for example, as a part of that list, maybe I go down here to the bottom and put in a TV. For my TV, maybe I give it a specific physical size. Maybe it's going to be 42 inches by, let's see, well, actually, let's make this 4 inches. I'm going to consider that more like a depth than a length right now. The width of this TV, I'll make it 42, and the height, maybe I make it 36. So now that I've got that as a part of my lookup, if I go right back over here to my TV, because it knows how to look that information up, it actually pre-filled it out over here, 4 inches, 42 inches, 36 inches. So now if I was to go ahead and place and validate the content and place the families again, it's going to re-rip back through my project, and now all of a sudden, because it has physical sizes, it knows what it's supposed to do, and it placed that TV out here in the actual space. So I now have a TV placed as well. This is my classroom distance learning TV. So I also have something similar going on down in these classrooms here for my grade 12 classroom. So if I grab this room tag here, pull off the side, one of the things I have here is a marker board. I've got, in this case, this is an instructor chair that might go near the desk. I've got the actual desk itself. As I pull this off to the side, one of the things you'll notice is that I have some components out here that are not generic components. They look better defined than just a cube. These are those tablet desks that I placed out there. So I can kind of move these around and spatially plan out what I want these to do. Of course, I can grab them and rotate them, simple space bar actions out there. Can rotate these components, putting them wherever I'd like them to go, right? So you can actually specify the real piece of content out here pretty easily, as long as there's an easy list for the designer to follow as they're talking with the client. And of course, you can then plan out these spaces. We've talked before about how this tool can validate if you have the right type of content out there. If I take one of those student desks and delete it from this particular space, this would be classroom 12, room number 156. If I go back to Room Family Manager and I use the validate tools right here, if I validate the rooms, I'm going to sort this by room name. Yeah, so if I go down here, in this case, my classroom 156 right here, it's going to yell at me and say that there's too few families. The tablet chair arm doesn't exist in there. So I could replace those families again. That'll go through and replace those components. It now passes the check because, of course, there's that room, that particular piece of content was replaced in that room, and I have redefined 30 desks in that particular space. All right, the last step inside of here is to swap families. Now, this swapping of families can be leveraged either while I'm placing the rooms directly as time goes on by using the place families and validate, as long as I'm using both the original definition and the family mappings, which is the swap families tab up here. But if I do this after the fact, after I've already got that distance learning configuration set up, if I go to this chair instructor, if I wanted to use one of those chairs already loaded in my project, I might use this chair stacking configuration right there. It's just a basic chair, like a task chair or like a lunchroom chair. And I can go ahead and swap my room families. Now, before I actually run that swap, what I'm going to do is pull that space back up on screen so you can actually see that chair, which is sitting right here. This is the placeholder content. We're going to see that chair swap out. So if I go to Room Family Manager here, I'll pull this a little bit off to the right, a little bit more. There we go. Room Family Manager. If I grab this swap families right here, I've got this mapping set, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it to swap the room families. It'll rip through my entire project, find all of the instances of this distance learning chair instructor, and it'll swap it out. So it saves me from going through and finding them myself. It'll just help me with the swapping process. And then also when I'm validating later on, it'll consider this chair right here as the chair it's supposed to be using and validate against it instead of validating against the old chair instructor as originally spec'd by the designer back here on the Build Rooms tab. So it'll actually leverage either of the two tabs to actually run its validation, which is very nice. Now, after I've done that swap right there, of course, I might want to relay out the space a little bit by hitting my space bar to rotate this. Come on now, rotate. You know you want to. I doesn't want to rotate right now. It's not a big deal. But I can certainly go through the exercise here of working with different types and pieces of content, placing them in spaces, planning out spaces, and going from there.